So welcome everybody to Cloud 9. During this sub-session we will take a small deep dive into the world of carbon credits, carbon offsetting and how that is part of the climate solution. My name is Michiel Tijmensen. I'm head of carbon trading and portfolio at Climate Neutral Group. Today I'm joined by Miquel Rubio, business development director from our sister company in Spain, Antices Lavola. Very happy to have Miquel together with me today. This session can be interactive. It's about half an hour, 45 minutes. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand to ask. It can also be at the end of the session, but feel free at any moment in time. So, what are we going to do today? First, we'll start with the fundamentals. What are carbon credits? What is offsetting? And why do we need carbon standards for carbon credits? We'll go into a project cycle. So from the very first project ID to actual issuance of carbon credits and retirement of them. We'll do that with the help by using a specific project example. We'll discuss the various project types that we see in the market and how they are changing over time as part of the offsetting strategy. We'll touch upon the topic of carbon credit pricing, and we have a very interesting showcase example from one of our Spanish clients. So the fundamentals. What is a carbon credit? A carbon credit is a reduction or removal of 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. And that can be used to compensate for greenhouse gas emissions made elsewhere. Now that doesn't give you the right to emit as much as you want. However, you should start by reducing your own footprint, and any part that you're unable to reduce, that you're still emitting, you can offset it by means of a carbon reduction project somewhere else, by means of a carbon credit. For carbon credits to be credible, they need to have certain characteristics. First of all, they have to be real. They have to be linked to a specific project. For instance, a wind farm in India that reduces carbon emissions compared to the traditional way of generating power. They have to be verifiable. An independent third party needs to be able to control that the emission reductions actually took place. They have to be additional to a business as usual scenario. If every power generation in India would be wind farms, it's not additional. However, if it's mainly fossil fuels, a wind farm reduces CO2 emissions. It has to be permanent, and we'll come back to the topic of short-lived and long-lived storage. And it has to be without net harm. It cannot damage the local communities. For instance, a large hydro project usually needs a dam, and that dam may cause thousands of houses to be flooded. And if these households are forced to move away, that is a very negative impact on the local environment, and we do not consider those types of projects to deliver credible carbon credits. Also, carbon credits can only be counted once. Every carbon credit can be used only once. So for that reason, we need carbon standards to make sure that all these quality requirements are met. So carbon standards, they assure quality, additionality and verifiability. First of all, carbon standards have certain methodologies. For instance, how to calculate how much emission reductions you are reducing, how much emissions you are reducing compared to a business as usual scenario for a wind farm in India. Standards have specific methodologies for that. Standards have independent auditors, like SGS, like TÜV Nord, making sure you comply with all the regulations. And standards have registry systems where you can track and monitor your actual emission reductions. Climate Neutral Group is a founding member of ICROA, the International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance. And ICROA is the branch organization for carbon offsetting. It has very strict rules a code of conduct that all its members have to comply to. And also Climate Neutral Group is audited every year to make sure we comply with this code. For instance, we can only use high quality standards like the VCS or the gold standard. And also, if we retire offsets for one of our clients, for instance 5,000 tons for a specific footprint, we have to assure that we only have used these credits for that specific client. So we're being audited to make sure that we deliver on what we promise, and it's all verifiable. Now, before we go into a project cycle, I would like to show you one of the projects we've been working with for a longer period of time to get some inspiration.
A single fuel-efficient stove can save nearly 3 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. An innovative non-profit company is working in Asia, Central America and Africa to sell these savings as carbon credits, and it's using the money to make the stoves more affordable for customers. There's a large market for fuel-efficient stoves in Kampala, Uganda's capital. The stoves can cut fuel bills by over a third, but with the price of metal on the rise, stove companies have struggled to keep prices within reach of Uganda's poorest. This project is plugging the gap, using the international carbon markets to make the stove companies more efficient and able to scale up, which in turn brings down the cost of the stoves. EUF is one of the project's key partners in Kampala.
Originally, we were making 100 stoves per month, but just recently we've made 3,200 visits. We're in position of subsidizing the stove cost, and we give it out at a fair price to the final users. It also helped us in doing marketing campaigns. Just recently we had a e-promotion that will help finance, and that was the best sales we made ever since we started.
Personally, I find this a very inspiring project. First of all, because it helps fight climate change. But not only because of that, it also shows the mechanism of carbon credits is working. This project is able to scale up more than 30 times because of the value of the carbon credits. The efficiency or the economies of scale are being achieved, and reduced prices can be offered, so more households are able to afford a clean cook stove. And not only that, also it means because of reduction of wood usage, there's more time for the women in the household because they need less time to collect the wood. So they can spend this time on education or other jobs, so it helps gender equality. And last but not least, it helps the living environment because the traditional tree fire stoves are open stoves with a lot of toxic fumes, and the efficient cook stoves, they have significantly less emissions in the house, less toxic emissions in the house, so it helps the health of the communities. For now, are there any questions that you would like to share? We have more opportunities at the end of the presentation. Let's use this specific project to go into the project cycle. And thanks, Geert, for sharing your slide. It starts with an initial idea. So how are you going to distribute your cook stoves? You're making a business plan. How can you make it viable? Do we have a standard that has a methodology for this specific project? And once you have defined all that, you've come to the conclusion that the project's feasible, you go into the next phase. And that's the phase of writing a project design document. You have to do that in line with the methodology of the standard that you choose. And both the VCS as well as the gold standard, they have suitable methodologies for cook stove projects. So the project design documents, it describes how you will distribute your cook stoves, why it is additional to business as usual. Well, here it's obvious that most households cannot afford a clean cook stove without some form of subsidy. Also, you have to show how much emissions are being reduced. how much wood are they using in the previous situation and how much wood are they using now, and is that wood that they actually are using, is that taken from deforestation? So you have to write all that in your project design document, and then an independent third party validates that. So the SGS of this world, the TÜV Nord, they validate that you've done your work properly, you comply with the methodology, and then you can request registration at the specific carbon standard. The carbon standard itself does another scrutiny check. And once that has been completed, your project is registered, and it can be publicly seen in the registry system of that specific carbon standard. So now you have a registered project, but you still need to implement it. So you have to distribute your cookstoves, and also you have to monitor how they are performing. According to your project design document, you have prepared a monitoring plan, meaning how are you going to show that the 20,000 cookstoves that you've distributed, that they're working properly, that there actually is less wood being used. The video I've shown is a short clip of a larger video, and there you actually see later on that they're weighing the amounts of wood that they're using in the current situation, and they're comparing it to the amount of wood that they were using before. And they do that for a sample batch, and based on that they can determine with great certainty how much wood is being saved there as fuel. Once you've monitored your project for a certain period of time, let's say for a year, you prepare your monitoring report, you have an independent third party verify your monitoring report, and once that's completed, you can request issuance of your carbon credits. And once your carbon credits are issued, they are being issued in the registry system with a unique serial number. Let's say you have 20,000 tons of cookstoves, 20,000 cookstoves, 3 tons per cookstove, you have 60,000 tons of carbon credits issued in your account because you've proven in your verification process that you've actually reduced that amount of CO2. These 60,000 are labeled, linked to the project, linked to the country, and linked to the period of time which they have been generated. And for that code, they get numbers 1 to 60,000. So you can track one-on-one every CO2 emission reduction back to the project and back to the moment in time. Climate Neutral Group has accounts within the various registry systems of the standards, and these carbon credits are issued into our account. And if we provide offsets to one of our clients, we retire these carbon credits and they can never be used again. So in the registry, it's all publicly available, it's all transparent with all the project documentation. You can show that it's only used once for retirement.
My turn. Thank you, Michel. Good morning, everybody. One time, Michel has explained it about what is the offsetting, how is the carbon cycle to develop a project. The question is, how many projects exist in the world? In this moment, more or less existing 170 types of projects. Okay, we can classify it renewable energy, waste, forestry, land use, etc. But what is one of the main difference between these types of projects? You can see in this slide. In this slide, we divided the carbon project types in too many groups. On the side orange, we can find avoiding projects. These projects avoid emissions now, in this moment, okay? On the other side, in the green side, we can find the carbon removal projects. In this case, the focus is in the atmosphere existing CO2 emissions in this moment, but we need to remove from the atmosphere. Okay? This is the main difference between these groups. This difference is created by the Oxford compensation principles. Okay? This is a good reputation body that we believe and we implement in our projects. Between these groups, we can divide it in 5 other groups. Okay? The difference between the bottom groups is basically about the storage, okay? Because one of these projects storage some volume emissions, and the other ones only avoiding. if we describe, for example, the first group is a typical group of the carbon projects in the market, fixed more or less in the renewable energy projects or the cook-stove project. In this case, what is the main goal of these projects? Is avoid emissions when are them implemented. Okay? In this case, for example, if you can imagine a wind energy project in India, in this case, Michiel commented before, the objective is produce renewable energy to substitute a no renewable energy. In this case, for example, could be a thermal treatment plant. Okay, is another. The second group and the third group are very similar. Okay, in these cases, is avoiding emissions, but could be a storage some part of the carbon emissions produced. I want to give an example. For example, in the second group, the typical projects, the conservation forestry projects in Brazil, for example. In this case, we have a main forest that in the past years, this forest remove carbon emissions from the atmosphere. But this volume, in this moment, is fixed in this forestry. What happens if these carbon emissions embodied in the biomass of the forestry burn or disappear? We have a problem. For this reason, we are avoiding emissions there if we conserve this project. Okay? For the reason is in the second group. The third group is a typical group. It's a newer, more the other ones, but in this case, it's the carbon capture storage. No? When we want to produce energy from the non-renewable energy, but we apply methods to capture these emissions. In this case, we have a storage in a long term. For the reason is the third group. The last ones, in the green side, we have the short and the long term storage from the carbon removal projects. In the fourth group, we can find a reforestation. This is very clear. If we plant trees around the world, you are promote carbon absorption, carbon removal from the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. In the last group, maybe is the most newer, okay, in this case. In this case, the projects are focused in implement a technological solution. For example, maybe you know a project named Orca. In this case, is promoted a technology that captures directly the carbon emissions from the air. Okay, this is a project that in this moment is in a pilot moment, but could be an interesting solution in the future years. Okay. What is the better, ones or the others? The dancer, can you see?
What is the difference? What is short term and what is long term? Because if I plant a tree, some trees grow very old. So
yeah, for example, short term is 100 years. For example, that is true. We can find forestry older than one, no? But more or less 100 years. But in the long storage, we are thought 100 years. Okay, maybe it's different.
Why there is this difference in timing between, like, for example, reforestation and algae?
Algae. The difference in the algae is the life, okay, of the, in this case, this vegetable, okay. But the process is very similar than one and the others, okay. The only difference is the algae's life during most of years than the forest is the unique difference because the process is the same. Okay. I remember about what do you tell you? What is better? The answer is both. We need it. Okay. 1 second, please. Well, both we need it because in a short term we need to stop our emissions to the atmosphere. For this reason, the first one I need it in this moment. But in the future years, we need, sure, the last ones because we have problem now and we need to remove the emissions produced until now. Okay, please.
Sorry, I just had a question on the hydro because I don't understand how you can carbon offset when
It's a good question because no, it's a good question because in our portfolio we not promote the hydro projects. Okay, why not promote?
Small scale hydro.
Yeah.
And that can be very beneficial. Because you have very small run river hydro,
Okay, yeah.
then you're not impacting the environment, and that can also work very well.
Yeah, but I also noticed there were some really
Yes. But those we don't promote indeed.
Here the question is, which is better than one the others, no? The large hydro, in our opinion, is not interested for us and not for our clients, but the run hydro, the smaller scale hydro, is interesting because promote the developing growth in the local areas, okay, give an access to the renewable energy, etc. Now I want to show 3 examples, okay? This is a typical example of the carbon markets is the wind energy in India. You can find this project in China, in South America, okay? It's very common. In these cases, the main goal is to produce renewable energy and substitute the no renewable sources, okay? It's very clear that it's true. When we need to select which is better in the wind energy projects, we're looking for example, projects that promote another SDGs, for example. It's so typical that a lot of wind energy projects promote, for example, develop a training awareness campaign in the local area to give access, local work, local jobs, okay, the local habitants. The second one is that you can watch it before, no? The cook stove. Michiel explained very well about what is interesting for us and for all our clients. And the last one is the forest conservation. In the forestry, it's interesting to know that exist 2 types of projects. The conservation projects, okay? In this case, I explained it before that the main interest is avoid the emissions, avoiding the carbon biomass not emit again. And the other one is the forestry projects. In this case, we want to promote more forestry to capture more emissions emitted before. Okay. What is interesting in this case, this project, because promote another SDGs, for example, not only promote the conservation, if promote also develop the local growth in the local area, promote the conservation of some species of different wild animals, wild plants, etc. And that's it all about the projects. And my question will be, Michel, what is the prices? What is the availability? If you want, say me.
That's like your everyday question, right?
Okay.
All right, so let me try to summarize the project types. Yes, question.
Just one question before we go on. Does the project have to be in the developing world?
It doesn't have to be. It has to be additional to business as usual. And it doesn't have to be, and it is not allowed to be part of an obligatory commitment from a developed country, for instance. A biochar project reduces compared to a baseline of 0, because it actually captures CO2 from the air, so take negative emissions. It can happen anywhere.
And it can still be certified. What
Yep.
we see is a lot of clients,
Yep.
particularly in the UK now, saying they'd rather it was domestic. So they'd rather stick to
Yep.
on the school down.
We also have reduction projects domestically in the Netherlands, which are not part of the scope of the obligatory emission reduction targets. So that's possible. And if you have removal projects which are, well, on top of a baseline of 0, they can be anywhere. You can plant trees anywhere. You can produce biochar anywhere because it's negative emissions compared to a 0 business as usual scenario.
Yeah, I was still chewing on your first slides. You had a list of 6 bullets when you talked about what makes carbon credits credible. And then you quickly said the standards assure quality, additionality, and verifiability.
Yep.
And then I thought, I'm still missing a few bullets, but is maybe the permanent aspect is in the quality. And thinking of the cook stove project, how do you guarantee that it's actually a permanent effect and that they don't, maybe someday something's wrong with the cook stove and they go back to...
Yeah, that's the fair question, and it's actually not the cook stoves are not permanent. Usually they have an average lifetime of about 3 years. That's being monitored, obviously. And during these 3 years, you cut less wood, so you have less deforestation, which has a continuous impact. So the cook stoves have a certain lifetime, but the impact is still there after the cook stoves are not usable anymore.
Yeah, so you can count it for the 3 years
Yep.
maybe of the cook stoves,
Yep.
but it is in the standard that they keep track of, hey, are we still using
Absolutely,
the system?
absolutely. And you're not going to monitor all 20,000 of them, but you're going to monitor, for instance, a few hundred.
Yeah.
And then you see the average lifetime is more or less 3 years. And that's what you've assumed according to your methodology, but you have to prove that in practice that it's actually true. And if it turns out to be 2.5, you'll get less emission credits. You'll get less carbon credits. If it turns out to be 4, you'll get more carbon credits because you actually reduced more.
Yeah. So then more general, are the 6 bullets of a credible carbon credit covered by the good standards?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. They're all covered. And that's also why we comply with these specific standards. Yeah. So let me try to summarize what Mickey explained us about the project types. So we have reductions and removals, and we have reductions without storage and with short and long-lived storage, and we have removals with short-lived and long-lived storage. Now what is important is that we are moving from reduction to removal. And if we want to be net zero in 2050 as a world, we cannot offset our emissions by reducing somewhere else, because then we're still emitting. So if we are emitting in 2050, we have to offset that 100% by taking CO2 from the air, by removing CO2. So that's what you see with the Oxford principles, that gradually over time, we're moving away from reduction and we're moving towards removals. And within the removals, we're starting with afforestation, with reforestation, so basically planting new forests. But we're moving into the more longer term solutions like biochar. And we need to make one important remark with this chart. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense that you want to move from reduction to removal, but we're not there yet. If you look at the right side of the chart, specifically the long-lived removals, like the biochars, there's hardly any availability of such projects. Yes, they are being developed, but still, it's a very limited amount of carbon credits available from these projects. And if they are available, they easily are priced well over 100 euros, and we've seen projects over 500 euros. So that's why we're starting with reduction projects right now, which is helping the whole world to reduce its emissions. I'm forgetting one important step. We have to reduce our own footprint first, but in terms of offsetting, we're starting with reducing the whole world's footprint altogether, but the final step has to be using removals. So we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And we need more of these long-term removal projects to be able to get there.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned that the prices could be up to 500 euros. But how does that work? Because there's a market, right? If
Yep.
nobody offers 500, or there are...
Well, that's exactly right. It's demand and supply. The demand for these types of removal projects is increasing. And because it's increasing, and the supply is hardly increasing, prices, they skyrocket. And what companies usually do nowadays is that for the remaining footprint, they take a small percentage of that, and they use, for instance, a biochar project for that. So for that small percentage, they're using long-lived removals, and for the remainder, they're using reductions. And that's exactly what's shown here. In the course of time, you're increasing that amount of removals in your offsetting portfolio to end up with 100% long-lived removals.
There's another reason why it will take time. It costs a lot of money, a lot of large investments that are not being made yet.
Yep.
Because they're not being made yet.
No, you're absolutely right. And the 100 euros I mentioned is if you pay today for a project that still needs to be started and will have credits in 5 or 10 years. The 500 euros is for maybe the 1 or 2 projects that have been developed already and that have issued carbon credits.
So there are companies who are developing their portfolio with this in mind.
This is actually what we promote. And we see larger companies acting in line with this, where today the percentage of removals is relatively small. We see the demand for removals from afforestation increasing, and there's some supply. And the good news is also supply is increasing because of this. But it's step by step. Yeah, that brings us to...
Michiel, there.
Sorry, yeah.
It was just from the other slide. But isn't the market doing that automatically? Because also the renewable or the renewable energies are getting more expensive now because more people
Yeah.
are investing in that, so automatically it will leverage, I hope.
I think that's a great bridge to the next topic. So thank you for that, and we'll touch upon that point. What we see here is, for the last year, the relative carbon price development for 3 types of projects. We see red projects, which is deforestation. We see renewable energy projects, and we see cookstove projects. Now, what we see is an incredible increase in the 4th quarter of last year. Tripling, quadrupling. I mean, that's not seen in most markets, to, I would say, historical high levels. And why is that? It's actually supply-demand. We see a lot of increased demand. In November last year, there was the Conference of Parties in Glasgow for 2 weeks, where the eyes of the whole world, all the policymakers, is on the climate problem. And we see a lot of companies at that moment in time making new pledges, so making new net zero pledges, meaning new demand, a lot of new demand, a lot of new attention for carbon credits, carbon offsetting. Supply cannot change overnight. To develop a project, we've seen Geert's beautiful slide on project development. It takes 2-3 years from first idea to have your actual first carbon credit, or maybe even 5 years if a project needs a longer time. So increased demand does not immediately lead to additional carbon credits. So what happened after that huge increase? It levels for a bit, and then in February of this year, obviously there was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, leading to a lot of things: economic uncertainty, power prices skyrocketing, inflation increasing, interest rates going up, and we saw the carbon prices coming down again. However, historically they're still at very high levels, more than double than where they were a year ago. Cookstoves are taking a bit slower path, more stable, but they ended up at the same point more or less. And the reason for that is that it's a smaller market with more longer-term relationships between suppliers and demand and off-takers. And one of the things I want to add, and then I'll come to your question. This has shown that the mechanism works. And why? Because we've seen new projects being developed. We expect in the next 2-3 years the amount of cookstove projects to double. We've seen a lot of new forestry projects being developed right now, because now they are possible with these carbon prices. 2 years ago they were not possible, but now they are. So the mechanism works. If companies are pledging net zero, we see an increase in demand, and we see new projects being developed, which is exactly what we want to achieve.
So my question is, how often do you introduce new projects, and how often do you scout new projects that go into that project development cycle, and how does that work? How quickly are you shifting from more the avoiding emissions to the removal?
Well, again, that's a good question. Let's go back to the previous slide. This is a timeline of 30 years. So today, the majority of our projects are category 1 and 2. So reductions with no storage or short-term storage. So the cookstove projects, renewable energy, avoided deforestation. We're increasing the amount of reforestation projects in our portfolio by a significant amount, especially compared to 2-3 years ago, where it was almost zero. Now we're actually have a significant percentage of removal projects, and we're trying to follow this trend. In terms of scouting the biochar projects, that's very difficult nowadays because there's high demand and very limited supply on that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so how do you get in between that market?
Well, that's our job.
I know, I'm thinking this do it for us, so.
Well, we can have a further discussion on that, how we source our credits and I think one of the things is that we try to build up long-term relationships with the project developers, and we develop our own projects. So I think those are the two key points for making sure we get access to the right credits. And now we have a very interesting case study to show that.
Okay. I love it, this business case, because I'm working with this company from 6 years ago, more or less. But that is true. In the 3 years ago, we started with a specific project, that the climate strategy. Okay. In this case, this company is Ferrer. Ferrer is a Spanish company based in Barcelona. Okay, but it's a multinational because it works around the world. Okay, and a characteristic is a B Corp certified company. This is a label that shows us what type of company it is. Okay, but his president, in this case, and its CEO, have a strong soul and a strong commitment about the sustainability. And now, how is the main topic is the climate, they decided, okay, we want to define a specific and a strong climate strategy, okay? And we started to work with them. The first step in this case was to calculate, obviously, the carbon footprint for them, okay? We recalculate during last 3 years. And last year, we add them a new step, okay? Because they submit and defined previously a reduction plan according to the science-based target, okay? This company submit their target, and this target was validated by this initiative. But after this, or maybe at the same time, the company asked us we want to add another step, okay? In this case, we want to be a carbon neutral. Carbon neutral? I don't know, maybe we want to be net zero. Okay, net zero? No. One more. We want to become carbon positive. Okay? As you can see, all of these three claimers are good possible, but what is the difference between them? After I want to explain about what is the difference, okay? But before, I want to let Ferrer explain you about what is each positioning, okay? I'll show you now a video, okay? This video is edited by our communication design team in a thesis, okay? I hope love you, okay? Here, okay.
At Ferrer, we set a major goal for ourselves in our new climate strategy, being carbon positive. We would like to not only reduce and offset CO2 emissions, but also capture more than we generate. Direct emissions by 2030, which are those under our control, and also indirect emissions by 2050, which are those related to our value chain. To achieve this, we will implement actions that promote the circular economy and the mitigation of climate change according to 6 commitments. Establish reduction goals for our emissions based on science. Promote the circular economy. Energy decarbonisation. We will foster sustainable mobility. To involve our suppliers in our climate strategy. We will neutralise all emissions that we cannot reduce.
As you can see, I think is a good example, because in this case, this company, Ferrer, has defined a big strategy, okay? And from Anthesis, we supported in define in all this strategy, okay? Here, I want to show, maybe someone of you knows this method because is our soul, is our activator journey, okay? How is applied with this client, with Ferrer, okay? In this case, the three first actions are included in our first step is the analytics phase, okay? In this case, we analyze what's the problem, which it was their carbon footprint, with risk analysis, risk climate, etc. Okay. The second part, I explained before, we define an SBT and neutralization and a carbon offsetting strategy. After I give you more details about this part, okay, about the neutralization strategy. But it's so interesting that the rest of the actions to included in this strategy involve all the business, all Ferrer, and involve the different vectors around the company, the circular economy, the energy efficiency, and other else, okay? Specifically about the neutralization roadmap, is a clear example that what is our thing about when one company wants to define a strong climate strategy, okay? The companies needed, in this case, define in the top of the chart a reduction plan, okay? And the down part of the chart, we define a neutralization offsetting part. In a specific case of Ferrer, the key is in define the different milestones in the next years, okay? The first milestone in this case is this year, 22, Ferrer want to be a carbon neutral only in its scopes 1 and 2. Okay, this is important because a lot of companies show I am carbon neutral about this one scope, 2 part of your carbon footprint. In this case, Ferrer is very clear, only in the scope 1 and 2. Okay, what is the next milestones? In 2030, the next milestone will be to be a net zero, okay, by scope 1 and 2. What is maybe the problem here? What understand you about the net zero? Net zero is when we reduce all our emissions until maybe some part that we can reduce, okay? And this part that can be reduced, we offsetting, but not offsetting with avoiding projects. Always we offsetting with removal projects. This is the key. When we promote net zero, we only use it removal carbon projects. In the 2030, Ferrer will be carbon positive in addition for the scope 1 and 2. What means carbon positive in this case? Means that Ferrer wants to offset more than its carbon footprint, okay? For example, if the company emits 5,000 tons, they want to offset that year 7,000 tons, okay, about the project. In this case, the main milestone and objective of Ferrer is to be carbon positive for all emissions in 2050, okay, using removal projects around the world. How the Ferrer has been carbon neutral this year? In this case, we calculate the carbon footprint, have a reduction plan that's implemented during a large of the year. But I want to explain 2 main actions in this part to become a carbon neutral. The first one, in the right side of the screen, is that we offer Ferrer energy attribute certificates. This action is very similar than the offsetting, but we need to say that it's so different because in this case, when we use renewable energy certificates, we are reducing the carbon footprint. In our accounting, we can account that as a reduce. For the reason, the first step in any client is to use any energy attribute certificates at the beginning. After this, we have the final value of the carbon footprint, and we can offsetting through different projects. In this case, as in the neutralization strategy of Ferrer, we define which criteria we use it in the offsettings choosing projects. We choose two types of projects. One is a renewable energy project in Mexico, because Ferrer have one of the biggest plants in Mexico, and the other one is a conservation forestry project in Costa Rica, because Ferrer have interest in to promote their business in this country. Okay? And this is more, okay?
Yeah, that's a very good timing, Miquel, because I just heard the plenary session is about to restart. So thank you for your attention, and if you have any further questions, feel free to approach us later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.